Joe Colombo, the mob boss who fought the FBI, a story of power, pride, and a public downfall. Episode 19. This is Mob Truth, Episode 19. Today we dive into the story of a man who blurred the line between mafia power and political activism. A man who didn't just run a crime family, he launched a civil rights movement. His name was Joe Colombo, boss of the crime family that still bears his name. At a time when most mobsters kept their heads down, Joe Colombo stood front and center. He gave speeches, held rallies, even went on television. But standing in the spotlight has its price. This is the rise and fall of the only mob boss who dared to challenge the FBI and paid for it in blood. Early life addict. Joseph Colombo was born in Brooklyn, New York in 1923. His father, Anthony Colombo, was himself an enforcer for the Profaci crime family. But like many mob sons, Joe grew up trying to walk both sides of the street, working legitimate jobs while staying close to the underworld. As a young man, he joined the U.S. Coast Guard, but was discharged after a medical episode. After that, he drifted back toward the life. The streets of Brooklyn were buzzing with opportunity, and Joe Colombo had the name, the contacts, and the guts to move up fast. Rise the 1950s family, rise to the power addict. By the 1950s, Colombo was rising through the ranks of the Profaci family. When boss Joseph Profaci died in 1962, the family fractured into rival factions. But Colombo didn't just survive the chaos, he outmaneuvered everyone. Backed by Carlo Gambino, Colombo took control of the family in 1963, and in a bold move, he named it after himself, the Colombo crime family. That made him unique. No other boss had ever done that. It was a sign of confidence or arrogance, depending on who you asked. The most of USI too or CVI Cedar, but also how homes in most hard as phrasing your brands in Brings Farm, which may hate this coming in. The Civil Rights League addict. In 1970, Colombo did something no one expected. He launched the Italian-American Civil Rights League. His message? That Italians were being unfairly targeted by the FBI, and that the mafia stereotype was a racist myth. Thousands showed up to his rallies. Celebrities, businessmen, and even some politicians voiced support. Colombo was now a public figure, something unheard of for a mafia boss. But behind the scenes, some of his own men were nervous. This was drawing too much heat, and not everyone believed it was about civil rights. Some said it was just a shield to deflect the FBI's eyes from his operations. War with the feds addict says. The FBI didn't care about speeches or rallies. They cared about wiretaps, money trails, and missing witnesses. Colombo became enemy number one for J. Edgar Hoover's agents. They raided his businesses, bugged his meetings, and leaked dirt to the press. But Colombo didn't back down, he doubled down. More interviews, more marches, more cameras. To the public, he looked like a hero. To the Bureau, he was a criminal mastermind hiding behind the First Amendment. As at Bernamblo, the Sipmani case like causes mothering. In most of a mobio ver uses like the Indio and Javice's discarringer, these CES Gaddick says. The shooting addict Gaddick, Joe Colombo was preparing to speak when a man walked up and shot him in the head at point-blank range. The shooter, Jerome Johnson, was immediately gunned down by Colombo's men. But questions swirled. Was Johnson a lone wolf, a government plant, a rival family's hitman? Colombo survived, but just barely. He would remain paralyzed for the rest of his life, never fully regaining speech or control. His public war against the FBI was over, in silence. After the shooting. Colombo's shooting sent shockwaves through the five families. A mob boss had been taken out in broad daylight, not by cops or rivals, but by someone in the crowd. With Joe paralyzed, the power vacuum inside the Colombo family became dangerous. His son Joseph Jr. tried to hold things together, but internal factions began pulling in different directions. Meanwhile, the FBI increased surveillance, hoping the chaos would expose hidden leaders. But what they found instead was a war waiting to erupt, the internal split. With Colombo incapacitated, Carmine Persico, known as the Snake, began consolidating power from the shadows. He was smart, ruthless, and patient. Persico didn't make a big move immediately. He let time pass, slowly taking control of loyal soldiers and resources. By the mid-1970s, Persico had declared himself the new boss of the Colombo family. The name stayed the same, but the Colombo era was over. For some, Colombo was a bold leader. For others, a liability who brought too much heat. Either way, the family would never be the same again. Conspiracy whispers. Rumors about the shooting never stopped. Some believed Jerome Johnson was hired by the Gambinos, who thought Colombo was drawing too much attention. Others whispered it was the FBI, orchestrating an assassination without fingerprints. But no proof ever surfaced. The case closed with Johnson dead and Colombo barely alive. In mob history, that's as close to the truth as you're going to get. A mystery buried under silence, fear, and power plays. Public image versus private power. Colombo's public image was complicated. To many Italian Americans, he was a hero who stood up for respect and dignity. To the government, he was a gangster using civil rights as a smokescreen. The truth likely sits in between. He was a mob boss, yes, but also a man who saw the power of media, community, and protest. He didn't just run rackets, he ran headlines, and that made him dangerous, not just to law enforcement, but to his own kind. Colombo's final years. Joe Colombo lived 7 more years after the shooting, bedridden and unable to speak. His family kept him in a private home, guarded around the clock. He was visited by priests, family members, and occasionally old friends from the life. But the man who once stood in front of crowds and cameras never gave another speech. He died in 1978 at the age of 54, his body failing, his voice gone, and his legacy split between myth and memory. The name that stayed. Despite the turmoil, the Colombo name stayed on the books. Even after Persico took over, even after dozens of indictments, the family remained one of New York's 5. Joe Colombo's name, a man who dared to be public in a secret world, still echoes in mob history. Not for the crimes he committed, but for the cameras he faced. A new kind of boss. Joe Colombo wasn't your typical mob boss. He didn't hide in the shadows or avoid the press. He embraced the spotlight, gave speeches, ran public events, and became a household name. In a world where silence meant survival, Colombo gambled on visibility. And for a while, it worked. He built a loyal following, won hearts, and made people believe he stood for something bigger than himself. The Gambino connection. Colombo's rise wasn't just personal ambition. He had Gambino's support behind him, especially from Carlo Gambino, who saw Colombo as a stabilizer in chaotic times. Gambino didn't care about civil rights. He cared about money and order. Backing Colombo meant keeping the Profaci-Colombo family from collapsing into civil war. But even Gambino had limits. When Colombo got too loud, too visible, Gambino's support grew cold. Media manipulation. Colombo was a master of image. He invited cameras, wore American flag pins, and painted himself as a family man. He positioned the Mafia as misunderstood businessmen, not criminals. He even compared the FBI's behavior to persecution. Some newspapers started to soften their tone. Politicians hesitated to speak out. For a moment, it looked like Colombo might actually rebrand the mob itself. The Sons of Colombo. After the shooting, Joe Colombo's son, Joseph Jr., tried to hold the league together. He gave interviews, talked about civil rights, and even flirted with politics. But without his father's presence and charisma, the movement collapsed. The FBI raids increased. Donations dried up. Supporters disappeared. The league had been a one-man show, and that man was gone. A legacy of chaos. Colombo's assassination didn't bring peace. It brought chaos. The Colombo family fractured again, leading to decades of bloody internal wars. His attempt to be both a boss and a public figure set a dangerous precedent, one that echoed in later mob disasters like John Gotti. Colombo's gamble opened the door to media attention, but the mob was never meant to live under the spotlight. The unspoken rule. In the Mafia, there's one rule above all. Stay quiet. Stay in the shadows. Joe Colombo broke that rule. And in doing so, he didn't just challenge the FBI, he challenged the entire code of Cosa Nostra, and for that, he paid the ultimate price. The message behind the movement. Some say Colombo's League was just a stunt. Others say it gave pride to thousands of Italian Americans who felt cornered by media stereotypes. Whatever the motive, the impact was real. Newspapers covered Italian American causes, celebrities spoke up, and for a brief moment, a mafia boss became the face of a movement. When family means business. Colombo's use of his own biological family in leadership roles blurred lines between personal and professional. His sons and relatives helped manage the league, handle press, and control optics. That tight circle made things secure, but also fragile. When Colombo was shot, everything collapsed like a house of cards. In the Mafia, using real family can be strength or a fatal weakness. The media trap. Colombo believed he could outplay the press, control the story, win sympathy. But once the media turns on you, it doesn't stop. After the shooting, journalists dug deeper into his past. His league's finances were questioned. The narrative flipped, from activist to manipulator. And the public that once cheered slowly stepped back. The Fed's silent victory. The FBI never convicted Joe Colombo. They never needed to. His public image drew all the attention they needed to dismantle his organization. Agents used surveillance footage, public interviews, even civil rights events to build maps of his crew. While Colombo gave speeches, they collected names. In the end, Colombo gave them everything and didn't even know it. Why he still matters. Joe Colombo changed how the Mafia was seen. He proved the mob could shape public opinion, if only briefly. His story is more than just a rise and fall. It's a warning, a reminder that even kings can crumble when they trade shadows for spotlights. The final split. When Joe Colombo died in 1978, his funeral was modest by mob standards. No major bosses came, no show of force. The five families had already moved on. His league was finished. The family was under new control. The man who tried to turn crime into cause was buried quietly, like just another casualty in the long war between power and silence. The message behind the movement. Some say Colombo's League was just a stunt. Others say it gave pride to thousands of Italian Americans who felt cornered by media stereotypes. Whatever the motive, the impact was real. Newspapers covered Italian American causes, celebrities spoke up, and for a brief moment, a mafia boss became the face of a movement. When family means business. Colombo's use of his own biological family in leadership roles blurred lines between personal and professional. His sons and relatives helped manage the league, handle press, and control optics. That tight circle made things secure, but also fragile. When Colombo was shot, everything collapsed like a house of cards. In the Mafia, using real family can be strength or a fatal weakness. The media trap. Colombo believed he could outplay the press, control the story, win sympathy. But once the media turns on you, it doesn't stop. After the shooting, journalists dug deeper into his past. His league's finances were questioned. The narrative flipped, from activist to manipulator. And the public that once cheered slowly stepped back. The Fed's silent victory. The FBI never convicted Joe Colombo. They never needed to. His public image drew all the attention they needed to dismantle his organization. Agents used surveillance footage, public interviews, even civil rights events to build maps of his crew. While Colombo gave speeches, they collected names. In the end, Colombo gave them everything and didn't even know it. Why he still matters. Joe Colombo changed how the Mafia was seen. He proved the mob could shape public opinion, if only briefly. His story is more than just a rise and fall. It's a warning, a reminder that even kings can crumble when they trade shadows for spotlights. The final split. When Joe Colombo died in 1978, his funeral was modest by mob standards. No major bosses came, no show of force. The five families had already moved on. His league was finished. The family was under new control. The man who tried to turn crime into cause was buried quietly, like just another casualty in the long war between power and silence. The strange shooter. Jerome Johnson, the man who shot Joe Colombo, had no mob ties. He wasn't Italian, He had no known criminal background. Some claim he was a lone protester. Others said he was paid off. But no one truly believed he acted alone. In a world where every hit is ordered, a freelance assassin just doesn't fit the pattern. The theory game. Rumors spread fast after the shooting. Some said Carlo Gambino wanted Colombo gone to restore secrecy. Others claimed the FBI orchestrated the entire event to shut down the league. Colombo had embarrassed too many powerful men, inside and outside the mob. And powerful men don't forget. A city divided. After the attack, New York was divided. Some communities mourned Colombo as a martyr, others quietly celebrated, relieved that his rallies and interviews would stop. The civil rights protests faded, and the press turned its attention to the next scandal, the next mob war, the next loudmouth with a target on his back. Acios, the last public boss. Joe Colombo was likely the last mob boss to go fully public, until John Gotti a decade later. But Colombo did it first, and his story proved one thing clearly. The Mafia was never designed for fame. Publicity brings problems, and Joe Colombo, more than anyone, paid that price. An icon and a warning. To some, Colombo is a symbol of pride, a man who fought back against a system that labeled every Italian a gangster. To others, he's the fool who brought cameras to a knife fight. Either way, his story is unforgettable. It's part inspiration, part cautionary tale. The Mafia's media curse. After Colombo's downfall, mob bosses became camera shy again, until John Gotti. But by then, the media was sharper, the FBI smarter. Colombo cracked the door open, and everyone who followed got burned. He taught the underworld a hard lesson. You can't fight the system and expect to survive in the light. The silence after the shot. When Colombo was wheeled away from Columbus Circle, the crowd was stunned into silence. Minutes earlier, they were chanting slogans, waving signs, defying the system. After the shot, they were running, screaming, and the league, the movement built on noise, ended in absolute silence. A mob boss tried to become a leader, and it ended with blood on a microphone. What the FBI really wanted. The FBI didn't want to arrest Joe Colombo. They wanted to neutralize him. He was too loud, too visible. Every time he opened his mouth, he opened a new can of trouble. The Bureau didn't have to pull the trigger. They just had to wait. Colombo's own ambition did the work for them. The mob's code was broken. Colombo's actions broke the unwritten rules. No cameras, no press conferences, no civil rights rallies. The bosses watched in silence, waiting to see how far he'd go. And when he finally went too far, they looked away when he was shot. His family paid too. Joe Colombo's personal family, his wife, children, brothers, paid for his decisions. They lived under surveillance, constant fear, isolation. His son tried to carry the flame, but it burned out. His wife remained loyal, by his side until his death, watching the man she loved fade away one quiet day at a time. The books never closed. To this day, no one has been officially tied to Joe Colombo's shooting. No arrest, no conviction, just a dead shooter and 100 theories. In mob history, that's how many stories end, not with justice, but with silence. The name that lives. Colombo still sits in FBI files, in Mafia charts, in courtroom testimonies. But the man himself? He's a ghost, half myth, half martyr. He tried to make the mob mainstream, and instead, he made it vulnerable. You've been listening to Mob Truth, the channel where history gets told straight, no sugarcoating, no Hollywood fluff. If you made it this far, you're one of us now. So hit that subscribe button and join the crew. We drop stories like this every week, and we don't hold back. Welcome to the family. And to all our new soldiers out there, respect. This was the story of Joe Colombo, the mob boss who fought the FBI, and lost his voice trying to be heard. Until next time, stay sharp, stay loyal, and remember, in this world, silence isn't weakness, it's protection.